All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. Today, you are in for a special treat, and so am I. Today, I have a guest on who I am just super excited to get to know. This is a guest who I feel like I know extremely well, although I think I've only really connected with her over the last maybe 2 or 3 months. But she's a guest that I swear every time I turn around, there she is. No matter what app I'm on, there she is. No matter what chat I'm in, there she is. She is a mom. She is a runner. She is a teacher. She is a podcast listener extraordinaire. Like, she listens to all the things. So I'm sure she's going to be critical of what we're doing here today, but I'm super excited to hear what she has to offer. Today, I've got the one, the only, Laura McDonell on. Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Oh, it is more exciting for me. Seriously, you are one of those people that you've just popped into my world, and I'm just so intrigued to learn more than the 280 character tweets can tell me. So, and I'm sure the listeners have been seeing you all over the place as well lately. So, Laura, do you mind just introducing yourself to everybody?
Yeah, it's exciting when I think about how I came across your name. Actually, I was listening to Tara Martin's podcast about being real, the real journey, I think it is, and she had you as a guest on there, and it was quite a while ago. And I remember listening to the episode with you, and then I looked at your website right away, looked at some of your books. I started listening to your first book that you had put on the podcast, and then started connecting with and noticing some of the things that you put out there, and was really, really fascinated just by the amount of different posts that you put out, and just the different thoughts and the things that get me thinking. And sometimes I would get very upset at some of the things that you would say, and I remember, I do not like this, and I would tell my husband, this is not right, this is, I totally disagree with this. But then, as I was telling my students, I love this because it gets me fired up. I have an opinion about this. It makes me think about it. It makes me really kind of assess, what do I think and why do I do this, and that kind of thing. So I do appreciate, even though sometimes I get very irritated by some of the things, and it just gets me kind of charged up, but I think that's also a good thing though too, based on some of the content you put out there. And I absolutely love your podcast. I love listening to it. You always have very interesting people on there, so I'm very excited to be here. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I run. I'm a distance runner. I'm actually training for my 32nd marathon right now, and that'll be in Toledo a month from today, actually. So it's still a go. So I'm super excited about that. Distance runner. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks and a lot of podcasts when I run, as well as when I do housework and just kind of during different things. I feel like I'm a big fan of personal growth and opportunities to be connected and to kind of just learn constantly. And audio learning is huge for me. It just seems like it's very easy to do. And so I love listening to different people's podcasts and, like I said, audiobooks at the same time. Reading is another thing that I actually used to be a terrible reader when I was in school. And right before college, started consuming a lot of books, primarily because I just realized I had to do something. I had to start becoming a better reader, and reading was probably the easiest way to do that, and went from reading very little to becoming an English major and now an English teacher, and reading well over 100 books a year. And so that's a big part of it. Some of those are audiobooks, as well as in print books. And so, consuming podcasts, reading, I feel like there's just no limit to the amount of growth you can do. And so I'm always very, very passionate about not being complacent and just finding something new to kind of grab onto and kind of learn about and see where that takes me and that sort of thing. So
that's awesome. That's one of my favorite introductions I've ever had on this podcast, because you just opened up so many separate Pandora's boxes. And I
feel like, and there's so many there's so many different things.
Right. In this episode, I want people to get to know you.
Okay.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, you disagree with me. How dare you? You're the only person on planet Earth that disagrees with me. So I'm not going to go there yet. Maybe we'll have a little public debate here in a second and break down some of those things you disagree with, because I am intrigued by that. Or maybe we'll save that for off air. But, it's funny you talk about how we first got connected. And that's a question I've wanted to know for a while here. I remember when your name was popping up on my feed all the time. I reached out to a couple of friends of mine on the Teach Better team and said, truly, do any of you know her? Because she's everywhere right now. And I was wondering how that connection happened.
Right.
And what you just described a lot reminds me of Ray Hewitt, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work or not.
Yeah, a little bit.
The idea of audio and that you weren't a good reader back in the day. Ray Hewitt, she teaches middle school right now. And she tells everybody she does not read, which is
right.
It's such an interesting thing. And
yes,
for a teacher,
yes,
to say that they don't necessarily read print all the time. So I'm just going to ask you directly. You said that you consume 100 books a year, and some of them are audio.
Yes.
Do you still consider that reading?
I do. And I find sometimes, and I know that it is kind of, I guess, maybe an easier format of reading in a way, because you can be doing multiple things at the same time and you're hearing a story. But sometimes I find that makes me read more, or that will introduce me to, if it's a tougher book, sometimes that I don't have a lot of awareness about, or it's an author that I'm not familiar with, sometimes an audiobook will get me into that story right away. And that's what I do a lot with my students too. Sometimes it's playing the first page or two or the first chapter, because if you miss the beginning of the book, I remember that in school, and you're just lost and you're like, how do I come back from this? And so that does help me find more books. I listen to a lot of book podcasts actually too. And so it's really neat to just hear the pronunciation of the characters, of different words. Right. And that makes a big difference too. And I think in my overall understanding of it, plus I run a lot, and that allows me to consume over 100 books, because otherwise I just don't have the time to read, or I do have the time. I just haven't prioritized reading that many books, I guess, in my life. So the audio helps that become an option. So I do consider it reading.
Oh, I love what you just described. I heard a statistic the other day that in America, 12% of adults admitted to reading one book in 2019, 12%. And the number one reason why was time. They felt like they did not have the time to sit down and read a book because of all of life's demands. But I love how you just described that you can take a book with you.
Take it with you when you're driving.
It doesn't have to stop you. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I would actually argue, to your point, I focus better when I'm listening to a book than sometimes when I'm sitting still, because when I'm sitting still reading a book, my mind tends to wander, and I'll flip the pages 4 times and I'm like, what did I just read? Because I was thinking about 3 things on my to-do list.
Right.
Whereas when I'm listening, it's constantly in my head. It's why I listen to podcasts, why I enjoy doing this, because when I can hear somebody in my ears, I feel like I've got a connection with them. So,
right. Absolutely. And I think it really does make a difference too for kids. I have 2 of my 3 kids love audiobooks, and they always have a story going on. And I feel like and that's usually my recommendation to people when they feel restless. It's like, you need an audiobook or a podcast. You need a story. You need something, somebody else's experience or somebody else's story going on in your head to kind of remove yourself from your life temporarily and kind of enjoy something else. And that, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. You mentioned 2 out of your 3 kids. So you've got 3 kids. What are their ages?
So I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary student this year. So I have I'm trying to think, 14, 12, and 10. And they're all, I guess, the half. So they're turning the next year here.
Wow. Okay. So 14, 12, and 10. Full-time job.
Yes.
You are listening to all the podcasts all the time.
Yep.
Grading tons and tons and tons of English papers and projects.
Right.
Training for a marathon in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
Okay.
Why not?
and we didn't even tell people you're in Michigan right now. So in Michigan, training for a marathon. And as we're recording this, it's still a little chilly outside, right? I just got to ask, how in the world do you get it all done?
Well, I have an incredibly supportive husband who is actually a distance runner. He's a marathoner as well and a teacher. So we both live a very similar kind of life when it comes to that. So running is a priority. I've never, ever been asked, well, why are you going for a run? That's never a question. Like, of course you're going for a run. That makes a lot of sense. So we both run upwards of at least 50-mile weeks pretty regularly. So it's a lot of time. Because I live close to where I work and I'm with the kids a lot more, because he drives an hour to work, I typically need to be around a lot more afterwards. And I feel like being a mom is very, very important, and being around my kids is also really important. So I don't want to sacrifice any of the time after school. And I can't imagine choosing something else over one of their activities, or, that's not the time to go running, or that's not the time to be working at that point. So I am a very early riser. I am a 4:00 in the morning riser. So that's part of where some of the time comes in, I think. And
okay, so we're breaking this piece down. So you're waking up when one of my kids is typically going to bed, right?
Oh,
that's a whole nother story for another day. But you're waking up when most listeners to this probably still have a couple hours of sleep coming their way. They're deep in the middle of REM. So first, you kind of explained the why, but I guess I need to ask even more so. Why are you willing to sacrifice sleep? Is it as simple as the statement you made? My kids need me in the afternoon, so I'm going to sacrifice it in the mornings, or is there more to it?
Well, like I said, I think being a parent and being around is definitely as much as you can do. And every year looks a little bit differently. And as they're getting older, it looks a little bit differently. It's not the same involvement. But I still think as much as I can be here in the afternoon, as much as I can just be around and I can be interacting with them and asking them about school, and whether it's talking to them about their running, or, watch them out shooting baskets or whatever that is, I think being present and kind of being around them is really, really important. And like I said, I don't want to sacrifice any of their games. I just don't want to miss those things. It's not that long of a time period. I have a high schooler who's going to be in college in 3 years. But during practices, that's definitely running time. If somebody has a practice, that's an hour, 2 hours sometimes, that's pure running time. And so that works out really well. But as far as the morning, I have always been a runner. I've been running since, I think, marathon since 2002, I want to say. And so I've always kind of run, and that's just a part of me. I honestly just can't stop running at this point. And that's so not only important to me, but it's so critical as an educator and as a parent, I think, to do something physically so that you can kind of exhaust some of your energy and kind of wear yourself out first thing in the day. I also like prioritizing myself first thing in the day and getting out there and running. Usually it's more of a 4:30 to 5 o'clock when I start running, but, and sometimes I'll read in the morning journal, or I'll do a few other things beforehand. But the morning seems to be the most predictable time. Plus, I can count on it, because after work and once you come home and things start happening, you just can't count on getting a run in. And I am a no excuse person with this. It's like, unless there are definitely things that can come up. There are illnesses, there are major things that can come up, and that makes a lot of sense. But there's no reason that the day just got busy. Like, that is not a good excuse not to run. So,
okay. Well, I'm going to
interject.
Yeah, I've got to interject, because you said early on that I say some things that you disagree with. So I guarantee there are some people that heard you say you wake up at 4 a.m. so you can take care of yourself first.
Right.
There are people that are hearing that saying, if you want to take care of yourself, sleep in. Because there's a lot of people that don't run for exactly what you just described, because it is a huge sacrifice. But I didn't hear you in any facet describe this as a sacrifice.
Oh, no.
I heard you say this is like, you crave it, you need it, it's a desire. Yes. Your kids are at practice, you're like, this is run time. And for a lot of other people, kids are at practice, it's scroll through the phone time. But you are right. You use every single minute of every single day.
Right. Well, sort of.
Except for when you're hanging out talking to me, right? No.
There you go.
But do you actually enjoy running? And I ask that in a real way, because I hate it, but I do it. You enjoy it.
Well, fun fact, I actually hated running in high school. I played basketball and softball and did a lot of team sports and really disliked running at that point. And it wasn't until I was on my first date actually with my husband now, who was an avid cross country runner, really good runner, trying to impress him. I said, oh yeah, we should go running sometime. This is when I didn't like to run, but then thought in my head, whoa, what did we just say? We said we were going to go running. I'm like, I can figure that out. And that's kind of my personality. Like, if I want to do something, I figured I can figure this out. I can make this happen. Like, I want to be a runner, so I'm going to be a runner. And that literally that night, I remember thinking, like, I just told someone I'm going to go running with them. I actually have to start running. And that kind of launched that, I guess, me into running. And there definitely have been many runs that have been a struggle and have been awful and just slow. And I've not, all throughout the years that I've had kids, I have never stopped running. And so some of those marathons were rough. Some of those were some slow slogs. And it's looked differently. I've just, some runs are not super fun, especially after mile 20 in a marathon. It's not very exciting sometimes. But there's something about the marathon that's just so empowering and exciting, and it just feels like that thing that I just have to do, that accomplishment. And for me, I guess it gives me that thing that I can show my kids, okay, this is what's possible. These are these really big goals. When I ran, last year I ran an ultra, my longest run, which was 40 miles. And I just remember thinking, like, one of my kids was like, he's a runner, and he was saying, maybe I want to run an ultra marathon, or maybe I want to do something. And that's so much another reason why I do it is because then it shows them, hey, you have permission to set really huge goals and you can do really crazy things. So,
I love that.
So that's part of it too.
I love that. Are you all in on all things that you do?
Well, it's hard to find focus sometimes because I get so excited about whatever it is and then sometimes I'm like, all right, I need to streamline. Okay, what are the biggest priorities? Right now, it's marathon training. It's being a parent. It's teaching right now. And that's taking a lot of energy and a lot of time to connect with kids because I'm pretty relentless. And even I've got a couple kids and it's like, they need to pass the class and they're so close. And so it's more emails, it's reaching out to them, it's sending them postcards. So it's extra time that, it's like, but the one of the guys that I was talking to, I'm like, we are going to get you to pass. You are not quitting at this point. You're so close, so I feel like with most things, yeah. And then, that's where I love connecting with people. And I think that's why I crave the connection with you, with, Dave Burgess company, with the Teach Better team, like all these different groups, because they're the people that are excited. They're the people that aren't burnout. They're not negative all the time about education. Because so many times, so many people that you talk to are just worn out. They're exhausted. They're tired, and they don't have that fire. And it's like you get online, and there's this group that hasn't given up on education. They're excited, and they're like, oh, and I have this new idea, and I do it this way. And sometimes I just want to be connected to those people because it transports you to this other place. And you're like, I don't even know what they talked about. I need to re-listen to this podcast, but they were really excited about it. And now I'm like, yes, this is why I'm in this group,
That is super cool to hear. Because you strike me as somebody that I would say is insanely curious.
Yes.
And so I am curious. Is the curiosity about people's passions, or is it their ideas? What is it that drives you right now? Because when I say that you are everywhere I look, I mean everywhere I look, and you're there. It seems like a sponge. You are there just gleaning information and ideas from anybody you can right now and asking amazing questions. You're involved in conversations. And it is so fascinating. It's so exciting. It's so inspirational for someone like me to see, which is why I reached out to you, because you intrigue me in the best possible way. You are that epitome of that person that I want to connect with online, that I want to connect with in life, who is so willing to learn and grow and be inspired and to inspire. You talked about looking for those people that are still optimistic. Is that why you are engaged, is because you're just looking for hope, or is it new ideas, new innovations? What's your niche right now?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I love the regular podcasts that I kind of listen to that pop up that are, some of my favorite ones. And I'm like, yes, I have a new podcast out, or this looks really good. Or the people like the one you did yesterday that aired yesterday with Melissa from Melissa and Doug.
Yeah.
We're so excited waiting for that one and couldn't wait to listen to it. And there are a bunch of them that are just really great, and the people are just inspiring to listen to. So there's definitely that. And I love optimistic, high energy people who are just excited about what they're doing. Just really, really passionate and just go-getter people that are finding a way to kind of get excited about whatever it is. But then I also really get interested in several of the different things that are brought up. I know the Teach Better team has talked about this grid method, and I find like sometimes I take a long time to slowly kind of understand and really grapple with and really just kind of get into a particular new thing. And a couple of the conversations you've had on grading, and that's where I start to struggle and get kind of like, I don't know, this is new. And yeah. I'm very, very, I would say, fiercely loyal to several things. Yeah. And once I've done something for a period of time, I have a hard time sometimes changing that. I do thrive on change, but yeah, once I've found something that works, I'm like, all right, this is what we're doing for a while here. Then you hear a new idea and it's like, I do love that though, where you kind of toe that line where you're like, I wonder if I'm going to change my mind on this. I wonder what I'm going to think. I wonder if it's going to make me question what I actually think. So I love that opportunity too, to kind of question what I think. So it's both. And especially when I hear, like I said, a specific new method or a new thing, for me, it takes a little bit of time, and it's the repetition of hearing it a couple times. And once I've heard it twice or seen it on a blog post and I've seen it in a podcast, then I'm like, okay, this is maybe something I need to start pursuing. I'm going to start looking at this. And for me, for learning styles, a lot of times audio seems to work really well for me. I'll YouTube it or I'll listen to it on a podcast, then I'll look it up, and it's that repetition of, okay, once I've heard it, seen it 3 or 4 times, I'm going to start to unpack it slowly, figure out how I can work with it, what I can do, ask some questions, that kind of thing. So I'd say both.
Well, first of all, I love the fact that you don't just hear things and say, okay, I'm going to do it because somebody said it. I think that's often one of the struggles we have in education today is, I call it conference-itis. Remember those old days when we used to be able to go to conferences and hear people speak?
Yes.
I remember when I was a teacher, I used to be so nervous when I found out my principal was going to a conference because they were going to hear somebody say something. And when they came back, everything was going to be different.
Right.
And I became that person for a while when I was an administrator, or even as a teacher. I would go and I'd hear one person that happened to have a microphone and think, well, somebody gave them a microphone. They must be smart.
Right. They must know.
They must have the answer.
Yes.
So let me do what they said. Yeah. So I love the fact that you hear things and you examine, is this right for me? And is it right for me right now?
Right.
So kudos to you for that. I do. I enjoy that. And I love that when you hear things, you reflect on it and don't just take it with a grain of salt. And you also don't just dismiss it right away. So I think you are finding that happy balance right there. You are that A student that is inquisitive and curious and reflective and wanting to grow. So I'm going to ask you what I consider to be an easy question, but it might be a difficult question for you to answer. Are you ready?
Yes.
Actually, I'll scaffold it. I'll ask a few questions, a few pieces of this. Number 1, are you a good runner?
Well, that's interesting. I used to think in terms of my personal record or my PRs, and those were in 2011, where I hit all of them. As far as good runner, I think it depends on how you define good runner. Am I a disciplined runner? Absolutely. If I say I'm going to get up at 5, I will be up at 5 running, like no question about it. Will I train for a marathon and follow a plan? Is well as I can? Absolutely. Am I determined? Am I a person who quits? Absolutely not. Like 14 is part of my Twitter handle, and that is specific because my 14th marathon in Ann Arbor, at mile 12, I was about ready to throw in the towel, and I never quit a marathon, never quit a race. And I was just so unhappy, so frustrated with my inability to run well, that I was so determined that I should quit. And so that just going through that process became, at the end, I was like, you better never take for granted the marathon process. It will put you in your place. It will show you where you didn't train. It will tell you how tough it is. And so 14 has always been my favorite number since that marathon, because that was that you didn't quit. Because I remember thinking, I'm going to have, my kids were there, and I'm like, I'm going to have to explain to them why I quit the marathon. And I don't think I can honestly, and they were younger at the time and had seen many races between my husband and I, but I said, I don't think I can look them in the eyes and say, I quit this marathon because I didn't feel like running, because I wasn't running well enough. And so that was part of, so I guess having not quit, and having just, and that's one of my rules with my kids, like, you've got to finish the race. And that's what I have. My high schooler just started swimming for the swim team this year. And I said, that's one of the things I want you to do. Just finish the race. I don't care how awful, how ugly, how terrible it is. And one of the first ones, he lost his goggles. And I was so excited because I said, you finished the race. Like, that's awesome. Like, you finish the race, and then no matter what it looks like. So I've always finished. I don't quit. I'm determined. Some days I run better than others. I don't know if good. I don't know how I define good.
Okay.
That's
I told you that was the scaffolded question. So that was the easy one. So the next question, first of all, how long have you been teaching?
This is my 19th year.
19 years.
Yes.
Are you a good teacher?
You know what? I am a very good teacher this year. I'm an excellent teacher this year. I am so proud of the way that this year has gone for me. Last year, I was not a good teacher. And honestly, I've taught, and I was looking at it, I think I wrote this down, 8 different schools, 4 different districts, high school, middle school, alternative education. Half of that was to just save a job. And as in the beginning of my career, it seemed like to stay employed, because I always was determined to keep a job. And my first job was teaching on the west side of the state, where I drove 70 miles one way because I was getting a teaching job right out of college, and I was determined. And so I've always had a job, but I've worked really, really hard to have a job. And sometimes that meant changing districts. Sometimes that meant getting a different position. I want to be an English teacher, but sometimes that meant teaching middle school computers, or sometimes that meant learning something completely different, and having to work in a situation where I wasn't super excited about it. And there were several years where I really enjoyed the challenge of learning something new. And I guess at times I wished I could have been doing something different, like high school English. And the last couple of years I struggled because I found myself getting really, really complacent in my position. It became easy. I wasn't having to stretch myself. I had kind of perfected what I was doing, and it got really, really boring for me. Even though I was trying to get excited about the kids, I just found the actual teaching, I just wasn't in it. I was struggling with it and thought about quitting. And last year, honestly, struggled like crazy. And there were many times where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I just can't do this. And that's when I realized I needed to put in a transfer request to teach in the same district, but to teach something different. And it was a struggle because two of my kids were at the middle school where I was teaching. So I felt a loyalty to that. I need to be in the school with the kids if I can. Why would I leave? But then now I have a high schooler in the building that I'm in, but I needed to teach something different. And it wasn't even that it was different. I needed a new challenge. And if I'm not growing and I'm kind of stable and just kind of plateauing, whether that's in running or whatever, I cannot stand it. Like I can't handle it. And I honestly got just so, I guess, kind of flatlined that it was a tough year. And was really, really wondering how I was going to keep going in that. So I don't think I did the best service to the students, but I will say when I worked in alternative ed, I had a great principal who said, on your worst day, you are somebody's best hope. And I remember thinking that a couple times. And honestly, there were probably days where I was better than others, but there's still kids that will come back and say, hey, I really loved what you did when you did that, or I really connected with you. And I know I had kids that were connecting with me. I just didn't feel like I was doing the best job that I could. And I really felt just kind of not excited about my content, not excited about, I needed a different age group. I just needed something different. And maybe that's because I had moved around so much in the beginning of my career, and I had been for 10 years at the same building, kind of same position. And I think I was struggling with that, and just needed something new. And I just kept thinking, like, you're made for more. There's so much more you can do right now. And that means you have to move to something different. And I just kept getting that nudge, like, you've got to do something different. And so I put in a transfer and ended up being able to teach what I think is my dream position right now, high school English. Absolutely love it. Honestly, like, I am excited to go to work. I'm excited. The pandemic or not, or the kids are in and out because of quarantine rules. Sometimes they're in person, sometimes they're virtual, like it's all over the place. But I have never been more excited about my content, about reaching out to the kids, talking with them, just getting them excited about, like, hey, you can get your grade up. We can work with you. What are you interested in? What can we do with this? And so I feel like I have a new fire about it. So this year I can say that I'm giving it everything I have, full energy. And yeah, this year I'm a good teacher. I don't know everything maybe perfectly about my content. I'm easing back into that after 12 years of not having taught high school English. I had taught it in the beginning of my career. So it's been a little bit of a learning process to get back into that part of it. But this year I'm an excellent teacher.
So as an excellent teacher, why are you still curious on how to do things better?
Because now that I've figured out, and it could be temporary, that maybe there's a different position before the end of my career. But now that I'm finally in what I really love, the content, I mean, as an avid reader and writer, I was like, I've got to teach English. I've got to teach English again. That's half of it. And I really like the high school age. I found that, you know what, this is the age I want to work with right now. This is where I want to be. And now that I'm in the right position, I feel like the last couple of years I had been with the wrong age group and the wrong content. So it was really, really getting to me. And now that I'm in the right position, I'm really excited to try new things out and I feel like there's always a different way of doing something, and there's probably a better way than I'm doing it. Even though I have the energy, the fire, the excitement about it, there could definitely be a different way of reaching kids. Kids are different, and I'm very relentless about finding a way to reach them. And it just looks different than when I started out teaching, and what worked then doesn't work now. And people have really exciting ideas. Every time I think, like, oh, I know, like, I've got some good ideas here. And then I listen to somebody else talk about some of the things they're doing. I'm like, wow, there is so much that I don't even know about. This is awesome. Like, I have a lot to learn still. And I love that I'm not at the top of the game with learning. I mean, there's just constant new information to learn.
Oh, first of all, I love your point to finding your strength. And now that you're living in your strength,
yes,
and your passion, you're seeing yourself flourish.
Right.
You as a person have not changed over the last 2 years. Your position changed, what you get to do changed, and it's allowing you to shine. And just thinking through the lens of what we oftentimes do with students is we try to tell all students, you just go through it. We need to make all of you average. We're going to focus on all of your deficits and bring all of you up to at least a proficient area, as opposed to living within your strengths and saying, we're going to tap into your passions and let you live where you are. I love that what you're saying to me is speaking to me. You're in your sweet spot right now. And because you're in your sweet spot, you've got the confidence to say, I am ready to learn more now. Whereas
Yes.
before, where you admitted you were not having your best experience, you were not motivated to keep improving.
Right.
Even though you knew in the moment, there's so much I need to be doing different, you
Yes.
did not feel that motivation. That's a powerful reflection.
Yes.
Powerful. So I'm curious, and a lot of fronts here, as to where you go from here. You know, if this year is an excellent year for you, doing the things that you're doing, there's this temptation now to make next year a repeat of this year. So granted, next year, hopefully we won't have the kids bouncing in and out. Hopefully they'll be there with you day in and day out.
Right.
Hopefully you'll still be in the same position, still have the same passion, the same fire. If next year at this time of year, you feel like you have done the same things, will next year be a success?
Next year, well, I mean, and you never quite know, because I am a product of multiple layoffs due to budget cuts over the years. And so right around this time of year, every year I would get that like, oh, well, I have a job. I need to just be grateful to have a job, which is true. But then now I'm realizing like, I do need to teach something I really enjoy. That's a big part of it for me. And I need to, if I can be, I really need to try to stay in that high school age group for right now. So I think I would definitely be working towards that. And I see what you're saying with this year being fantastic. And it's that novelty year. It's that new year. My first year teaching middle school computers, I was so excited because I taught myself how to do some coding. I taught myself how to do different things with technology that I had never learned before. And I think I was so excited about learning new things that kind of captivated me for a period of time. And so next year, I think I will, because I will look at it a little bit differently. I'll kind of latch on to something new within my content, within these different ways of presenting information. I think next year will look different because we'll have more in-person contact probably. And so that'll be a different experience in itself. But doing things virtually has also provided a whole new set of opportunities too, which gets me really kind of now, I mean, when you're in person, before there was a lot more distraction and a lot more interruptions in the class. And now when I'm teaching, we have 90-minute class periods. There's a lot of time that the kids are on, camera, but it's their icons and you're talking to them and they're all there, but you have to really present yourself differently. And you have to really work on your craft of getting excited about the stories and getting excited about the content and teaching. So I feel like I will just continue. I mean, you can never get too good at teaching and actually presenting the content. And then, like I said, I can't stay complacent. I can't just kind of go along. I almost never reuse the same things year to year because there's a different way of doing it. There's something new that comes up. There's just a new platform, or there's a new site that'll work or something like that. And so there's a better way of doing it. Yeah. And so I think that I have a good feeling about next year. I don't know what it'll look like, but it'll work out.
I love that. And I'm going to make a connection back to the first difficult question I asked you about running. And you really had a hard time identifying whether or not you are a good runner right now because you were comparing yourself back to who you were back in 2011 and the years before that and these benchmarks that you hit. But the only matrix that you were using to measure yourself against was your PR. So how fast could you run crazy long distances?
Yes.
But right now, a decade later, there's so much more going on in your life. You got so much more to contend with. You're still out there waking up at the crack of dawn. So then you started to shift and said, well, if I'm measuring it on consistency, then yes, I am. And you were able to give yourself not grace, but permission to start measuring success in a different way. I love that. Because I also heard a very similar thing from you just now when you're talking about teaching. That right now you are an excellent teacher because you're connecting with kids in a virtual world, because you've got passion for your new subject area again. And I think so many of us fall for the trap of thinking that new young love is going to last forever. And then 2-3 years later, you're like, oh, I don't feel the same. I'm not seeing the fireworks anymore. So you've got to reassess and find that new passion, that new interest.
Yes.
And you are already committed to doing that next year. I
Right.
heard that from you. Here are the things I'm going to be doing next year to make sure it's successful. And that fires me up.
Well, and that's, because that's the thing is the stuff that I'm learning, I feel like it's always going towards the next thing, in the sense like I'm present right now, I'm doing everything with my group now, but the stuff that I'm learning about on Twitter, the things that I'm learning about on podcasts, hearing people talk about, that's not stuff I can start implementing completely right now. There is just no way to start recrafting a whole bunch of things. But that's the stuff that, okay, I'm letting that kind of work right now in my mind. And then I'm going to transfer some of that, start really planning that over the summer. And that'll be the next year's kind of mode. So
yeah, right now you're in marathon planning phase. You're trying to figure out which marathon you're going to run and when you start the training cycle, right?
Yes.
And a training cycle is like 4 months long. So that gives you enough time here. Start putting the plan in place so that when the marathon of next year starts, you're ready to go. I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Well, Laura, I got to ask you, we've talked about a lot here. We've talked about motherhood. We've talked about running. We've talked a lot about teaching and innovation and Tara Martin and BBC and Teach. We've talked about a lot of different things here.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you were to think through all that we talked about, or maybe it's something we haven't even talked about yet. If you wanted to leave your listeners with a message, this is your opportunity to speak to all of those people that you follow online, that you are a sponge from. Now you get to impart something into them. What is the message that you want to leave them with? What is your opportunity to pick up that microphone, drop it, walk off the stage, and just leave everybody in awe?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I like to say, as the Ironman, the fitness program says, anything is possible. And I really think that's true. Anything, not everything at the same time.
Oh, that's good.
As a mom, you cannot do everything. As a working mom and runner, you cannot do everything at the same time. But I can do anything just if I, with enough hard work and I can get to a certain point and do just about anything, just not everything. I also think that there is always a reason to have hope, no matter how dark it gets, how frustrated you get. Things can turn around and surprise you, and there is always a reason to have hope. And what I leave my kids with every single day, and this was the cool thing about the virtual world, is I started doing this when we were online, because I thought they really need connection. They really need somebody talking to them. And it's really cool to do it in the classroom because everybody also looks up when I start to get this last moment. It feels like that closer, like that baseball player that's, coming in for the closing. And I look right at them, and I've had several students tell me, like, thank you for saying this. Like, it's so important. I love it when you say this every day. And it's, some of the only times I hear it. So I tell them, I say, all right, and in case nobody else tells you today, let me tell you that I am proud of you, that you are extraordinary, you are worth it, and you should chase your impossible. And the impossible is an illusion, and it begs to be chased. So that's what I tell them every day. I leave them with that. And I think people like to hear those kind of things, and it does make a difference. And that's where I'm like, yes, I'm finally becoming that teacher that I've always wanted to be, now that everything's starting to align. And yeah.
I'm going to take you back to your answer when you said that you are an excellent teacher, but you still have a little bit to learn about content. Mm-hmm. You are an excellent teacher because you've identified right there the secret sauce of being an excellent teacher, tapping into potential and encouraging kids to chase their dreams. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that we've been able to connect here, Laura. You are everything I hope that you would be. You truly, you walk the talk, and I am so honored that we were able to spend some time here tonight, just getting to know each other a little bit, sharing your story with everybody that is listening. If people want to continue on your journey with you, if they want to be able to celebrate you running yet another marathon, if they want to learn right alongside of you, how can people connect with you?
Well, a couple different ways. I'm McDonell 14 on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, and actually the numbers seem to play a big part in just different things. I'm Al McDonell 2001 on Instagram, and that's the year I got married and became a McDonell. So I guess that's how that, and now I have some students that will follow me and different things. I'd just rather, what's the point in changing that? So Al McDonell 2001 on Instagram, Al McDonell 14 on Twitter, and I do blog, although I write for a couple different sites now. So the blogging kind of takes a back seat sometimes, but still try to as much as I can, just because as an English teacher, it's really, really helpful for me to continue doing what I'm asking my students to do. So enjoyingeverymile.com is where my blog is at, although that's not updated as much as I'd like it to be.
Awesome. Well, we're going to encourage you to update that so we can read all the things going on with you. And if you're listening, all of those things will be linked at the bottom of this show. So just check it out. Continue to connect with her. She inspires me. She motivates me. She pushes me. And obviously I tick her off. So if for no other reason, follow her so that you can join her in the Dave Hate Parade. I love it. Laura, thank you again so much. This has been an absolute blast.
Thank you.